Wait a minute. Is this for real? This is not an official episode, so why am I reviewing it? Well, the answer is that Magpie and the Lost Narrator invited me to do so, but I have a hesitation about this. Fan works to me are a way to sharpen your skills and make a lot of beginner mistakes. You gotta be the fool now so you can become the ruler down the road. As such, poking fun at people's creative works can seem crueler than if I'd made fun of the actual show. And believe me, I've been plenty cruel. But let's see how well I do studying this labor of love from a channel that now has over 1 million subscribers. Pardon me as I celebrate this accomplishment while wrestling with insane jealousy. So, Princess Trixie Sparkle, or to be more accurate to the title, Princess Trixie Sparkle with the miniseries musical on YouTube. Because Magpie went all out on gathering a cast and put together half-hour plus segments for the whole story. So in a sense I'm reviewing two experiences as the musical videos are very different beasts from the published fiction. Of the two, I suspect that the musicals were always the end goal, as the descriptions for the written sections are very minimalist, almost clinical. Consider this description of Canterlot in Crisis. Canterlot had seen its fair share of disasters over the last few years, but somehow still managed a complete and chaotic panic whenever something went wrong. The ponies were in an uproar, demanding answers that Twilight and her friends could not give. It's doing a good job of describing the situation, but it seems detached from the mood. But the written word is only part of the videos. In terms of vocal talent, we have an array of fans lending their skills. In addition to various guest stars, we have It's Anna Cholam as Twilight Sparkle, Rarity, the Mayor, and Princess Celestia, Emogak as Rainbow Dash and Sakura, though Purple Rosalind took over for Rainbow Dash from episode 3 onwards, Magpie herself as Pinkie Pie, Apple Bloom, and Estelle, Haste Dash as Spike for 8 episodes before turning the role over to Glory of Rainwings, who also voiced Applejack, Scootaloo, and Pete Person, but then Haste came back for episode 11. Crick VA as Fluttershy up until episode 7, at which point Mary Medley took over and also voiced Princess Cadence. Rachel Gabriella Anderson as Trixie and Princess Luna. Pegasus Pitch VA as the Shadow Alicorn and Shining Armor. Warrior Cat Cloud Tail 5 and a Wiz as Spitfire. The Lost Narrator as Vinyl Scratch and Bon Bon. Micro Pony as Discord. Now it seems that one of the trickiest parts of this production is having such a wide cast who can only connect via the internet. You're going to have vocal talent with varying experiences in recording, different microphone setups, recording environments, and no support staff handy. As a result, the recording quality and approach is going to vary a great deal, as will the presentations. For my money, Rachel Anderson had the right approach when voicing Trixie. She doesn't roll her R's or try to match Kathleen Barr's presentation. Instead, she conveys the pride and standoff nature through her tone.
There is nothing that the great and powerful Trixie cannot do.
I think it's better to capture a character's emotion over emulating the voice. Other folks can do a plenty solid affectation that doesn't match the show, but you get where they're going, such as Glory of the Rainwings' presentation of Applejack.
Now wait just a doggone minute. Are you saying you're stuck like this?
And oh my gosh, Micro Pony's presentation of Discord is pretty spot on.
Oh, I can't believe how much fun it is to watch you ponies in a crisis.
But then there are times where a person is trying to force a voice, which ends up hindering the presentation. Haste Dash is trying for a voice deep enough to match Kathy Westluck's voice for Spike, which doesn't always work.
Next, we need to visit Sugar Cube Corner to pick up some cupcakes for Rarity's party tonight.
Now add to that the challenge of singing in such a voice. The musical aspect is its own challenge. With at least 2 musical numbers per episode, there's a lot of singing to be done. Rather than write 22 songs plus an intro on a budget of 0, Magpie and crew took existing songs and adapted their own lyrics. So you get to hear a song about evil plans with music from Avril Lavigne.
My time to shine. You will pay for everything you took away.
Or Flying Lessons with Taylor Swift.
And soaring, whirling, dashing.
And we can't have an MLP story without a villain song, composed by Linkin Park.
So bad was the only bitterness, a heart that's long and cold.
Now, the same hurdles faced with voice talent become even stronger here. How hard it must be to form a harmony for a duet or more when you're not only subject to internet lag, but also trying to affect a character's voice.
You have never known how true power feels.
I'm more a fan of the solo songs because, regardless of how the voice is recorded, it produces a consistent tone.
The weight of the crown demands our judgment. The weight of the crown demands our time.
Another challenge is that matching the song's pre-existing rhythm puts a hard limit on how one can apply new lyrics. There are some times where I think I could hear the cast being boxed in.
All of the mischief and the wonder.
So the musical numbers can be hit or miss, especially given personal preference. And while audio is a huge part of the series, one can't discount the art. Depending on the scene, we might get stills of vectors created by the community, or custom-made vectors, colored pencil drawings, marker drawings, and probably a few mediums I mistook. The only time when the visual struck poorly for me was when a hand-drawn character featured alongside a vector image. The visual dissonance was too strong. But for all these critiques, there's another element that shows through the series. Evolution. What starts with just a few voices and vector art becomes more the further we go. We get limited and then full animations. Vocal talent become more comfortable in their roles and acquire new equipment. New artists join the project and previous artists gain more skill. Just for an example, watch a little bit of episode 1 and compare it to episode 11. It's an amazing progression. All of this is meant to serve the story, which begins with Twilight still living in Golden Oaks Library, shortly after her ascension to Alicorn and the Phantom's descent into Flame Wars.
Twilight, you used to live in Cancerlot. I don't think you needed to read up on Cancerlot tradition and etiquette just because Princess Celestia wants you to help Princess Luna run the castle while she's gone for a few days.
Ah, this series has certainly captured friendship as magic's penchant for shotgun blasts of exposition. But Twilight's preparations for co-ruling Canterlot are cut short when Trixie appears with a sob story about needing magical help, only to bewitch her with a green gem. When Twilight awakens, well, she's not Twilight anymore.
Ah! Trixie! What did she do?
Stepping onto the platform of true villainy, Trixie has done a body switcheroo. But then she is gone for a good chunk of the story, leaving me to ponder the title. Is the subject of the story about Twilight Sparkle living life as Trixie, or Trixie horning in on Twilight Sparkle's life? Truth be told, it's not much of either. I can think of two key points from body swap stories I've witnessed. The first is simple comedy, as the character's completely out of their element.
You gonna wash your hands? No, 'cause I'm evil.
The second avenue is what we saw in She Talks to Angel, giving a character a chance to experience the world from another's perspective. Twilight really doesn't experience this as, after a brief round of persuasion, her friends acknowledge her identity and pledge their support. Twilight never encounters the resentment or hostility that Trixie claims to have endured, and so Twilight's left with a building anger against the pony who took so much from her. At the opposite perspective, we don't see much of Trixie beyond her interactions with Luna, and Trixie heightens her villainy by putting out a warrant for herself? This is very confusing. That's not to say we don't get a lot of entertainment from the body swap story, because Twilight's friends also wind up getting shuffled. In a very big whoops moment, there's a switcheroo between Applejack and Fluttershy, Pinkie Pie and Rarity, and Spike and Rainbow Dash. Now, we've certainly seen examples of the main six imitating one another.
I'm so sorry. I was just trying to help because I care about all of the Wonderbolts oh so much. And I know I say excited a lot when I'm actually just kind of excited, but this time I'm really excited about how excited I am about being this excited over the road part! But I'm not talking to any of you Pinkies unless you're the real Pinkie.
But this is the ponies trying to live their lives without their own identities, which leads to some pretty funny mix-ups. If you ever want to see Pinkie Pie lay into Jet Set and Upper Crust, here's your chance.
We know the Princess Twilight, she is our bestest friend, and Rarity's and fashions are all the latest trend. Do you know how many times that we've saved Canterlot? 2 or 3 or 4, the point is quite a lot.
Savage. In fact, this format seems to be ahead of its time. Consider how closely the core idea matches the cutie remark. An antagonist returns to ruin Twilight's life with unprecedented magic, leading to adventure where the larger part is witnessing Twilight's friends in roles outside the norm. This story came out a year before Starlight Glimmer hit the scene, and yet I have to salute that Magpie tapped into a creative vein that feels very similar to the show, and I recognize the characters as they speak and interact. My previous critique of the environment description still stands, but the characterization is spot on, particularly Trixie's projection.
All she cares about is her precious reputation as Celestia's prized student.
But just as Starlight Glimmer's reformation was very sudden and hard to accept, we're seeing the worst of Trixie without a hint for improvement. Why is it that so many fans have fixated on Trixie as a character? She only had one episode for a good while, yet I think there was a line that cemented her into fans' awareness.
Maybe someday she'll learn her lesson.
Just that one line, a promise of things to come, an idea of redemption for a pony who wasn't as dangerous as Nightmare Moon, but was far different in attitude from any pony we'd witnessed. As Trixie successfully imprisons Twilight, that redemption seems further and further away. The action remains with Twilight's friends as they try to sneak into the Grand Galloping Gala and attempt to rescue. Discord makes an appearance as a Canterlot resident, but he's remarkably unhelpful, more so than usual. He can't undo the body swap and can't get them into the palace. This is the problem with having a character who appears to be nigh omnipotent. How do you create a conflict when a creature like this is in play? Well, you make him a supreme ass while he sits back and watches Twilight's friends struggle. They try to get into the Wonderbolt show and win a rodeo for those sweet, sweet golden tickets, only to miss the mark and learn that Discord had a complete set this whole time, for which they properly thrash him. And these interpersonal conflicts are a big thing in the story. It's not just Trixie versus Twilight. Even Fluttershy can't excuse Discord's actions this time.
Don't you lecture me, mister. You've hurt your friend's feelings, and you need to give us some space until you can say you're sorry.
Meanwhile, Princess Luna is getting involved as Twilight's actions up to this point have been very undignified and non-Twilight.
One of them has a rainbow in her mane, one of them's pink. I think one of them's a unicorn? Ugh, I can't be expected to remember all that.
Up until the confrontation with Trixie, I could argue that this story would easily translate into the show itself. It understood the structure of many season openers and finales. Luna taking a part already goes beyond what the show often presents for the royals, but one would expect an ending where Trixie is bested, repents, and all is made well. Not so here. In the written form, the ponies are assaulted by a shadowy alicorn, which is a mindless creation of a hidden villain. In the musical dramas, this being is itself a character.
Though a shadow I may be, I assure you, I belong to no princess.
This is Shadow, and he is arguably the most tragic figure in this story. He represents the very relatable flaw of putting too much faith in someone who is undeserving, and ties into the larger theme of unresolved grudges. In either scenario, this intrusion changes the story's course, with Luna being abducted and the main six, Spike and Trixie, retreating to Ponyville. Though oddly, that scene I talked about earlier describing the panic in Canterlot never made it into the musical video. Perhaps because showing a city in chaos demanded too much time or energy. I'm just saying, Magpie, if you ever need help depicting mass panic, just let me know. I'm well practiced. But what about Trixie in all this? Her actions thus far have painted her as irredeemable. Even if she were brought low by Twilight and the others, having her truly repent would be a tough sell. To get Trixie back into some kind of middle ground, the scales need to tip. Thus, we are introduced to a new, worse villain, Estelle. Estelle is
the older sister of Celestia and Luna, who was the first queen of Equestria, but renounced the role when she couldn't get Star Swirl the Bearded to return her love. So she left and learned dark magic that cancels out Equestrian magic, and when she attacks again, Star Swirl was forced to become the Tree of Harmony. Estelle's magic caused nature to run wild. The plant life overgrew and became the Everfree Forest. Celestia managed to break Estelle's magic, which became contained in the Alicorn Amulet. But some of that magic lingered and would one day corrupt Luna into Nightmare Moon. She's still alive because Celestia's bloodline is immortal even though they started out as Earth ponies. Her presence is stirring both animals and dragons into violent frenzies. Now she's back and can summon Shadow Alicorns at will, but needs Trixie's help to reattain her unstoppable power just so she can wipe out magic in Equestria and then shatter her own immortality just like a proper edge pony.
You wish you were this grim, Tempest Shadow. Wow. Let's try to break this down. I like when authors have the courage to add something new to Equestria. The fandom on the whole is usually very resistant to adding an original character, though I think there's more leeway given for villains. That's because a powerful villain gives Twilight and friends a chance to rise up. And once again, Magpie is tapping into a creative mindset shared by the show staff. This came well before we learned about the Pillars, Stygian, and how all of Equestrian history is 5 degrees of Star Swirl the Bearded Jerk. But in addition to explaining the origin of the elements of harmony, Estelle's introduction also explains Celestia and Luna's backstory, the origin of the Everfree Forest, the origin of the Alicorn Amulet, the reasons why ponies have to manually change the seasons, and basically every quirk or oddity inherent to Equestria. Oh dear, I'm fading again. I think Estelle occupies too much of a presence in Equestria's history, a one-stop cause for all the world's aspects. In terms of backstory and motivation, she and Shadow are an interesting comparison. Estelle's history is more complex, and thus there's a lot more to tackle. The fact that the burden of command weighs so heavily upon her reflects on Celestia's achievements and what Twilight will eventually face. So in this way, I enjoy her as a distorted reflection, perhaps even more personal than Nightmare Moon. The unrequited love aspect overlaps with Estelle's feeling manipulated, but it also adds a petulant tone to her actions. We don't know much about her life before her ascension beyond one line.
I was young. I had the whole world in front of me, and he was the only stallion that paid me any attention.
So we have little context to know how much she's had to deal with isolation or feelings of rejection. Shadow's history is simpler as his entire life revolves around Estelle and Luna. I find I can better sympathize with him because his sense of isolation and fear of the wider world takes center stage. In fact, I'm not sure his fears are unfounded. Doesn't mean his actions are right, but it's an interesting character who does wrong while thinking it's for the right reasons. The introduction of a greater antagonist shifts Trixie from the prime opponent to an unlikely ally, giving her a chance to actually practice some selflessness, like saving Applejack from a rabid manticore. Too bad that after recruiting Princess Cadance and Shining Armor, Trixie's given the Alicorn amulet by mistake and whisked to Estelle's side. Thanks to an angry outburst by Twilight, Trixie experiences the ultimate fall as she becomes Trixie Midnight Sparkle. And along with Estelle, she goes to kill the Tree of Harmony.
No! This can't be possible!
Sorry, dude. They tried it first. It's here that Trixie finally has a moment to reflect on where she is and how she came to be this way. Her brief period with the main six was a constant squabble, but inwardly she seemed to appreciate what it meant. This is why I lament we only get to see such introspection at the end. I think it would mean more if we got to travel with Trixie as she moved from a selfish view to glimpse a bigger world. Twilight recognizes this, and even with the princesses imprisoned and the main six on their last legs, Trixie joins the party and Twilight acknowledges her as... 7th
element.
That element being the element of forgiveness. And just as adding Sunset Shimmer gave the strength to overcome the sirens, so too does Trixie's addition give them the power to break Estelle's magic, undo the body swap, and restore some semblance of normalcy to Equestria. Having Trixie become the element of forgiveness is a tricky subject with a lot to unpack. On a positive start, forgiveness is as much a conscious decision as telling the truth, sticking with someone, giving of one's own resources, offering a kind word, or choosing laughter over anger. You never feel like forgiving someone. Yet throughout much of this story, Trixie's been the one in need of forgiveness rather than the one to forgive. The elements don't work that way. Fluttershy was bullied through most of her foalhood, but she stayed kind despite that. Pinkie was a bundle of laughter in a very stoic family. And throughout the Rainbow Power arc, each of the main six faced an external temptation to resist their element, but ultimately made a positive choice. This is a power that comes from within. Which begs a question, what is there to forgive? Twilight really hasn't done anything wrong before. She saved Ponyville when Trixie could not, and then later outsmarted Trixie while she was under the Alicorn Amulet's influence. Yet Trixie can still forgive because it's not about whether or not Twilight's actions were wrong. It's about the anger Trixie feels. Much the same as Luna's resentment towards Celestia, the main six's anger at Discord, and Estelle's grudge against Star Swirl and her sisters. Yet as with many MLP redemptions, this is an awkward journey as it all seems to happen in the final act. Thus, instead of witnessing Trixie forgive, we witness her and Twilight reconcile. What's the difference? For that, I will quote psychologist Ryan Howes. Forgiveness is an internal process where you work through the hurt, gain an understanding of what happened, rebuild a sense of safety, and let go of the grudge. The offending party is not necessarily a part of this process. On the other hand, reconciliation is an interpersonal process where you dialogue with the offender about what happened, exchange stories, express the hurt, listen for the remorse, and begin to reestablish trust. It's a much more complicated, involved process that includes, but moves beyond forgiveness. Forgiveness is solo, reconciliation is a joint venture. Much of what we see in Princess Trixie Sparkle is a move towards reconciliation, and while forgiveness is an aspect, the two terms are not interchangeable. Twilight would have been well within her power to say, what Trixie did to me was unfair and cruel. The pain I felt in the past is real, but that same pain does not determine my future. I'm more than that. I will not let Trixie's actions control me, but I never want to see her again. That would be denying Trixie a reconciliation, but it would still be a form of forgiveness. This story presented a different action, but the option was always there. Though one could argue this reconciliation had a utilitarian approach, because settling things with Trixie is part of what saved Equestria. This story features a lot of elements that can be critiqued, but it also taps into a creative spirit that closely matches the show's later ideas. In fact, seeing what the show did later adds a new enjoyment to this story, and it's clearly a labor of love as a whole slew of people worked together and coordinated hours worth of music, visuals, and storytelling for the fandom to enjoy. Even the critiques I offer can be applied to the show itself, especially the idea of holding back on a character's redemptive actions until the final act. I'd say this is well worth a watch. If nothing else, I think this combination of writing, vocal talent, musical, and artistic expression helped demonstrate the creativity that attracted me to the Brony fandom in the first place. I'm Silver-Quill, and if you will pardon me, I need to check out the recently released start of the second story. Thanks for watching!